Final Fantasy is my favorite video game series of all time, and the 16th entry is right around the corner. If you're a PlayStation 5 owner who is still on the fence about this one, you don't need to sit around and just wait. The demo is out now, and I think it is so friggin' great. Seriously, the opening scenes of the game are just insane. And after over a decade of kind of rough Final Fantasy releases, it looks like this game might just have what it takes to be an amazing game right off the bat. So let's talk about it. The Final Fantasy XVI demo is basically the prologue of the game, with about 2 hours of content to enjoy. Now, I don't really play a ton of demos, but this feels like a really generous amount of content included here. Best of all, should you find yourself wanting to purchase the game afterward, you will be able to carry over your progress into the full game. And these 2 hours are packed full of lore and story, and it really gives you a good taste of what's in store for the full game. I finished my playthrough in absolute awe at the ending. It looks absolutely gorgeous, the music is powerful, and the story left me stunned. And from what I've been seeing online, it really looks like everyone who's giving this demo a chance is really loving it. And if you are someone who maybe didn't like the direction the last few games went, or maybe have never even tried a Final Fantasy before, you might want to give this one a chance. Final Fantasy XVI is a mix of old and new. The setting is going back to a more traditional fantasy setting with castles and knights and all that good stuff, but they're taking that setting and making a story for a more mature audience. It's very clear to me that this game is taking quite a bit of inspiration from Game of Thrones, not only in just the setting but also in the directing and even in its storytelling. We are getting Game of Thrones on chocobos, and after my time with the demo, I'm here for it. They make it work. They make it really work. The best Final Fantasy games are usually known for their exceptional stories, and while the demo might start out a little slow in its introduction of the characters, I do think once things get moving, it does get really crazy really fast. But that's not to say this is all Game of Thrones and no Final Fantasy. Once the game starts diving deeper into what's going on with the icons, there's really no denying this is a Final Fantasy. And if you've ever played a Final Fantasy game before, you should already be kind of familiar with these guys, whether you know them as Eidolons or Espers, Summons, whatever. These first appear in Final Fantasy III and have been included in every game in some way or another since. These icons are playing a huge role in the story this time around. And while I don't want to dive too deep into that, as you guys are going to need to play the demo for yourselves, I'll just say they are a big part of not only just the story, but also the combat, and you do get to play through some absolutely insane fight scenes with these things. These fights are nuts, and the scenes with them are breathtaking. I mean, they look so good. This demo serves as the prologue of the game, and also our introduction to Clive Rossfield, the main playable character of the game. The demo sets up Clive's backstory, and I'll just say, I feel like Clive is going to be a really great lead character. I'm very curious to see where the story is going to take him from here, but we'll go further into that in some future videos, I guess. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy stuff. Anyway, back to Clive, I just love his character design, and his voice actor is doing an amazing job. In fact, all of the voice actors have been doing a top-notch job so far. It's worth noting that the game was designed with its English version first, and I think it shows. To me, that makes a lot of sense. It should really come as no surprise that Square Enix wants the Final Fantasy series to do well overseas. But it's not just the voice acting that's outstanding here, the sound design in general is really good. The music is very dynamic, and when these icons are going at it, tearing down everything in their path, the music makes sure you feel the power and the weight of these destructive creatures. Now, while the setting is going back to the series' roots, the gameplay could not be further. Final Fantasy XVI is going full action here, and guys, I'm someone who grew up with the old ATB systems. I love turn-based RPGs, and I don't think they're dead. I don't even think they're necessarily dead in the Final Fantasy series, but at this point, Square Enix has been flirting with the idea of a full-action Final Fantasy game for a very long time now. Ultimately, I love turn-based RPGs, but I do like action RPGs too, and I know for some people they think the series died when it abandoned its turn-based roots or whatever, but I've never really been in that camp. But even then, I was still a little nervous going into this game to see how it would actually play out, but I do think the combat is good. The gameplay feels really smooth, and the combat is fun from what I got to play of it. Now, obviously you're not going to have everything opened up to you in the first 2 hours of the game, but from what they show off here, it feels really cool, and I'm excited to see how it opens up in the full game. Keep in mind that the game is also including a story mode option for those who aren't as into the action side of things, and it seems you can switch between these modes whenever you want to. I think for the most part, this mode makes it easier to pull off some of the more action-y things, such as evades, or maybe it makes the enemies a little bit weaker. Another change I wanted to point out is that Clive will be the only playable character this time around. And I've seen a few places mention that this is the first time a Final Fantasy game has done something like this, but Final Fantasy XV actually released this way as well, and at least that's the way it was when I first played it, I think. Now with Final Fantasy XV, they did add some DLC later on that would let you play as your party members, but they had a lot of DLC to get that game to the point it is now. With Final Fantasy XVI, that's not the way they're going to be doing this. In fact, 16 has no planned DLC at all, which I think is great. It shows that Yoshi P and Square Enix are confident in the finished product, and I think this is exactly what Square Enix needed to do with this game. And Final Fantasy XV was not the only game to be released in a somewhat unfinished state. Before Naoki Yoshida and his team turned Final Fantasy XIV into the successful game that it's known to be these days, the game was released to very poor reception, especially for a Final Fantasy game. When Square Enix brought Yoshi P in to fix the game, it would take the team a few years to turn it around into what it is now, as the team basically had to rebuild the entire game in the background while still providing updates for players who were still playing the initial released version of it. But yeah, they did pull that one off, and Final Fantasy XIV is awesome, but that's kind of aside from the point. This leaves us at 13 being the last Final Fantasy entry with a smooth release, and that was more than 13 years ago. But even with 13, it got a sequel just 2 years later, and another one a couple years after that, so maybe you could argue that 12 was really the last full Final Fantasy at release. And in my opinion, Square Enix really have to nail it with this one. But seeing as they went on to put Yoshida and his team in charge of creating this game after the wild success of turning around 14, I do think we're in good hands here, and after playing through the game, I'm very excited to see what's next. I think they really might pull this one off. And anyway, I guess that's about it for this one. Are you guys going to be picking up Final Fantasy XV? This is definitely going to be a very different feeling Final Fantasy game, and if you have played the demo, well, let me know what you think about it in the comments. I can't wait for this game to come out, and if you guys liked this video, don't forget to like the video, and hey, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Peace.